Hey everybody, it's Benny One, and I'm back at you with another series review, everybody, and I'm going to give you my first initial thoughts and reaction, and somewhat of a little bit of a review of the first episode of Game of Thrones, House of the Dragon, everybody. That is right. The new Game of Thrones spin-off prequel series that takes place, it's 172 years before the events of Game of Thrones happen, everybody. That is right. And it is based off of the book Fire and Blood and Song of Ice, those two Game of Thrones books that R.R. Martin have worked on and everything, and he's a producer on this. And the original showrunners and creators of Game of Thrones are not involved with this new series. And one thing I will say is, with this being newer people that are doing this prequel show, I really think they did a good job of bringing us back into this world of Westeros and King's Landing and everything, and just the world of Game of Thrones. I really think that they're reintroducing us to this very well. Very, very well. So I'm only going to do this one, and then I will wait till the entire series is over, and I will actually give a full review for the entire show. I usually just give my initial thoughts on the first episode of a series, and then I wait till the series is over, and I do just a full-on review of the whole season. So yeah, this is just going to be kind of my initial first thoughts. Won't talk about too many spoilers. There will be some spoilers in this. The episode's been out for a few days now, about four days now, so there will be some spoilers, just so you guys know. So, if you haven't seen this, there's going to be spoilers in here. So, yes, House of the Dragon, everybody, the prequel show that focuses on the Targaryens when they ruled King's Landing and Westeros and the Seven Kingdoms, everybody, that are in the world of Game of Thrones, everyone. And the thing that I loved about the opening part of this show is we're following in POV. Someone's on a dragon, flying through the clouds, and I love it. I love it right off the bat. I'm like, oh yeah, baby. I love dragons. I think they're badass. They were some of my favorite parts of the Game of Thrones series because they were very few in there, and then towards the end we got more and more of it. But yes, so we get this cool shot of a Targaryen riding a dragon into King's Landing, and we just get reintroduced to this world and King's Landing and everything through this POV shot with someone riding on a dragon. Awesome way to reintroduce the show and the world and everything. And then right away, the thing that I noticed about the show is that, so when you had Game of Thrones, and I love Game of Thrones. I did. I jumped on board after season 2 came out, and I watched season 3 all the way until the end as they were coming out. And I love Game of Thrones. I did not like the way it ended. I thought they did not a good job of ending that show. I'm not a fan of TV shows that introduce you to characters, quite a few characters too in the show, and they build these characters up and they show them grow and go through so much pain and suffering, and they grow and they get to these places to where they've grown so much and they've become these awesome characters and everything, and you're on this emotional ride with these people. And then at the very end of the show, they literally put all of those characters basically reverted back to the way they were when the show started, basically. I hate that shit. And that's what Game of Thrones did. I don't like that, because I feel like I wasted 10 years of being on this ride with these people. Like, I don't like that shit. So, but otherwise, love Game of Thrones. So, but the thing I noticed about this first episode is this is gonna be Game of Thrones for sure, because there was a pregnancy. Viserys the First, his wife, the queen, is having a baby. It's going to be the heir. And this is Game of Thrones. It's on HBO Max. It's very adult. And they most definitely let us know in this first episode that this is going to be just like Game of Thrones. You get some sex, nudity, blood, gore, The queen literally has to have a C-section because the heir, the son that they're going to have, the heir, is breached. And back in that time, basically, C-sections weren't really a thing. They kind of knew about them, and they could possibly save the child, but the mom was going to die. But when a baby was breached back then, most of the times the mom and the child died. So in that scene alone, I was like, wow, it was very bloody, very graphic, and they're letting you know that, yes, this is going to be just like Game of Thrones. And it is. But the thing I noticed that's a lot different from Game of Thrones to this one is that, see, now, like, Game of Thrones focused on 7 different kingdoms, and there was like 4 locations that the show constantly bounced around to. Whether you're talking about the Wall, King's Landing, there were 4 different locations that they were focusing on a bunch of different characters. So you only really spent little chunks of time with like Jon and the Lannisters and in Winterfell, like in Game of Thrones. So you were constantly bouncing around, where this show is literally focusing on the Targaryens when they ruled Westeros. They were at the height in the beginning of this show, at this episode. The Targaryens were at the height of their rule in King's Landing and of Westeros and the 7 Kingdoms. They were at their peak. And everything seemed cool, like peaceful and everything. Like, everyone seemed happy in King's Landing. It was a very peaceful time and everything. It was weird because we know the Targaryens as being these just kind of almost savage, like brutal people that ruled with fear of dragons and everything. And when we first get introduced to all these people, that's not what's going on. But they do slowly throughout this first episode, there are things that happen with Viserys' brother, Daemon Targaryen, played by Matt Smith, who does a fantastic job playing Daemon Targaryen. Like, he is going to be great as that character. And I'm guessing he's basically going to kind of be the villain of the show for the most part, because of what's going on with him and his brother and the Iron Throne and everything. So, yeah, it's going to be interesting shit. So they're already laying the groundwork, and yes, they're at peace right now, and it's a very peaceful time. But you can tell when Daemon comes back to King's Landing that this peaceful time is not going to last very long, and there is some dark shit. The doom and gloom is underlying this peaceful time that's going on. So, and they did a good job building that. And that's the thing there's a lot that happens in this first episode, where everything that happens in this first episode of House of the Dragon would have probably, with the characters that were established, would have taken about 4 episodes in Game of Thrones to go through and show. But since this show is just focusing on the Targaryens in King's Landing when they were ruling, we get to just tell the story of these characters, and it's a different way to do this show. Whereas Game of Thrones had a lot more going on with characters and kingdoms and everything, where this one's more focused on one kingdom and one family. There are little sprinkles of the other families in there, you know, like from Winterfell and all that stuff, and the Lannisters. Like, there's these people that we know and the other kingdoms that we know are here in this world, but they're just they're really in the background. They show them in little bits and pieces and stuff. Like, because I forget the Targaryen king's name. In the very beginning, when the dragon flies in, the Iron Throne is not there. It's a regular throne and everything, and he has to pick an heir, a successor to take over, because he doesn't have a child that takes over. And that's where Viserys gets picked to be the new king of King's Landing and rule. Like, he gets picked instead of an heir that's born and everything. And that kind of starts to cause a rift with the family and everything. And then when Daemon shows up, he thinks that he's going to take over as the king once his brother is done. But then the queen is going to have a baby, and he keeps saying, I know it's going to be a son. I know it's going to be a son. And when the baby is born, it is a boy. They have a boy. He has an heir to take over, but unfortunately, the boy does not survive. And we get to see this cool scene where they're all out there and one of the dragons burns them both in the wood pile. That's how I want to go, man. When I die, I don't want to just be cremated. I want to be put on a pile of wood and let me up, bitches. I want to burn like Darth Vader did and shit. So, but yeah, so he has no heir now. So he has to pick a successor, and his brother is just evil. You can tell he's evil. They put him in charge of like the watch guard or whatever of King's Landing, and they wear these golden freaking fleece thingies, and they literally go out because crime is starting to go up in King's Landing, and he says that his brother's not doing anything about it or paying attention to it. So he literally Daemon takes this guard out, and they go out and they literally just attack people out in King's Landing. They cut their fingers off. They cut this one guy's freaking junk off and everything. I was like, holy shit, man. It's just brutal. And like, he gets questioned by their little round table and everything at King's Landing and all that, and nobody trusts him, really. And I tell him, like, you can't just do that shit and stuff, and it's crazy. And there's this jousting tournament going on while the birth thing is going on, and it's just very entertaining stuff, like the whole jousting thing. And there's some brutal shit that happens in this episode, man. There's this one thing where it's like not a mace or whatever, but it's the thing where the metal chain and the spike balls on the end of it. That thing gets slammed into some guy's face on the ground at this jousting tournament and then ripped out, and it rips his entire jaw off and everything. I was like, oh, savage shit. I was like, yes, Game of Thrones is back, baby. I was like, this is awesome. So yes, it has everything you want from Game of Thrones. You got fucking dragons. There's 2 dragons in this first episode, and supposedly there's going to be 15 throughout the first season. There's 15 dragons they're going to introduce. And I like that the dragons look different, because if there's going to be 15 dragons, they need to look different so we know which one is which and everything. And the special effects with the dragons, I will say there were points in the first episode where I thought the special effects didn't look the best. But overall, I thought the show looked fantastic. I thought it was shot beautifully. Almost all of the special effects look good. Even the big green screen backgrounds, like, I thought they looked pretty good. The costumes, the blood, the gore, there's action, there's dragons. All the actors are doing a fantastic job playing these characters, man. Matt Smith I cannot wait to see how devious his character gets, because he gets sent away. Because Viserys the First, I might be mispronouncing his name, but I'm sorry. He has to pick his daughter to take over for him, and she will become the first woman to sit on the Iron Throne, because the Iron Throne exists now with his rule. And it's all different too, because it's got a bunch of spikes and shit coming down the stairs. It's not just the Iron Throne. But it's the same. And that's a lot of things too, is there's a lot of locations and stuff that we see in this that are the same as what was in Game of Thrones, but it was when the Targaryens were ruling. So we recognize it, but it's just a little bit different. So he has to pick his daughter to be the ruler, and he takes her down to this like crypt where the big giant dragon skull is and everything that was in Game of Thrones. And he tells her that you're going to have to rule and have all 7 kingdoms together, because Aegon told the story about winter is coming. The shit that happened in Game of Thrones, he tells her that each king gets this passed to them, each ruler, and you have to keep everyone together because of this looming threat of the snow and the ice from above the wall in the north is coming eventually. Winter is coming. So I love that connection. I was like, oh, yeah, baby. I was like, even though we're not going to see that shit in this show, I just love the connection with everything. I just thought they did a fantastic job with it. And as a premiere episode for the show to kick this off, I was very impressed. And I love that we're going to get to focus on one family And I feel like they're just going to be able to flush out these characters that are so just enriched and deep and everything with their characters and everything. There's just, Game of Thrones has a lot of interesting characters in their shows, and this is going to be another one where that's going to be awesome to watch people grow and change and backstab each other. It's Game of Thrones. That's what we're doing again, but it's one family. That's the thing, is that's the huge difference between Game of Thrones and then House of the Dragon is we're getting that Game of Thrones type of story, but it's within the Targaryen family, man. And it just, I'm excited about all this shit. I really am. So, my initial thoughts and reaction to the first episode of House of the Dragon, 2 thumbs up. I am not going to give it a score until I actually review the whole series. So, I would most definitely recommend checking this shit out. If you love Game of Thrones, even if you don't, check it out. It's a really good show. It's brutal. It's dark. It's very adult. Do not have your kids watch this shit. So yeah, guys, I'm most definitely a positive reaction going into the first episode of this. So I hope you guys enjoyed that. I thank you for watching, and I'll be catching you on the tube later because I have spoken.